Well, I could give you an academic answer as to which way the things are going, but let me give you an answer from the point of view of the fact that economics is a social science. It's about society. Therefore, it's about amelioration of the human condition. So to me, that is the central focus of where economics ought to be. It's more or less the English focus which I learned. It's also the focus I learned at MIT, which is where I came and spent a little time, because it's the most English school in the United States, actually, in terms of its orientation towards solving problems, which matter, rather than doing mathematical, pyrotechnics and so on. Now, the most important challenge facing us today, I think, is globalization, in the sense that I think things have changed very dramatically in the system, in the world economy, because the part of it is, of course, what is sometimes called the death of distance. People are much closer. A lot of economies have gotten much more integrated into the world economy as a result. We've reduced a lot of barriers to transactions. That's man-made. We have also improved technology. That's man-made too, but on the other hand, it is something which is not policy. It is, in fact, technology, right, which is really changing the conditions under which we live. Imagine in the 19th century, I read somewhere, there were 12 deliveries of the mail in London, on horseback, of course. Then it got steadily less, and then we had, two, I think. The last when I was studying in England, there were two, and then I think that now there's one. Now we've got emails. We've got delivery every second, right? As often. In fact, one of the most distracting things in the world is to have your BlackBerry with you, because it's very hard to control an impulse to see if somebody sent you something. So what we now have is a tremendous growth of technology, under which transactions have become so much more easy and more dramatic and instantaneous and so on, that I think that has really led to basically death of distance is really the way to do it. My student Paul Krugman, who's a major economist of the younger generation and writes an interesting column in the New York Times, Paul Krugman his major work, for which I hope he'll get the Nobel Prize one day, is on economic geography, meaning people actually transacting face-to-face with one another, all right? So people having to be in the same physiological space. And I often tease him, because it's the privilege of a professor to tease his students, particularly the ones he admires. And I say, Paul, you're just behind the curve. Geography has now become history. It's gone, because today, very rarely do you really need people to be together in the same place. You look at the number of people who are, writing papers together. Hardly anybody writes papers together with the people who are in the same department. Most of them are doing it with people who are skillions of miles away. Because endowments, technology, everything is changing all the time. What I mean is that at any one point of time, you have a certain set of endowments, which you have accumulated, you have shaped, and so on, which then define what you're good at, all right? Once you do that, then we economists say, and this goes back to Adam Smith in its very essence, over 200 years ago, that if maybe I can do everything better than you can, I can maybe interview better than you do, I can teach better than you do, but clearly my greatest advantage over you is in teaching. Certainly not in, I might be a little bit better than you at interviewing. There's this joke about, Jewish joke about someone asks somebody, can you play the violin? And the answer by this Jewish wit is that maybe I can, but I've never tried. So maybe I'm a better interviewer, but I've never tried it. So, but let's grant it for argument's sake. What economics teaches you, international economics, is that, and what Adam Smith pointed out was, that if I specialize in where my advantage over you is greater, and therefore teach and leave you to do the interviewing, we'll both be better off, because we'll have more of each of these two activities. And if each activity or each good is actually a good, not a bad like heroin, then you are going to be better off. So that's the fundamental case. Today, people are worried about this case, and we can come back to that later in the discussion, and try and see how the modern world looks. But the greatest argument against it today is that there are two sets of arguments, and let me just say, one is the social criticisms. The many young people are altruistic, empathetic, and they worry about the effects of globalization on women's rights, on democracy, on poverty in the poor countries, on indigenous culture, like Evo Morales, that globalization is going to wipe it out. Then Monsieur Beauvais in France worries about mainstream culture, that the French culture will be wiped out, and also French agriculture for that matter. So there's a double jeopardy for the French. And so there are a variety of such things. And those I would say are mainly the concerns of the young and idealistic people. And they really form the most important part of the world in my view. Then there are the fears and self-interest driven critics of globalization. Those are the AFL-CIO, all the presidential candidates today in the United States, who of course reflect the AFL-CIO fears and so on. They are worried about how trading with the outside world, having multinational corporations, investing abroad and so on, how all of that is going to really undermine our wages of us unskilled workers, maybe even of the middle class in some cases. There are some people who worry about that. But I would say that ties up with my original worry of what's going to happen to the bottom 30%. I'm a Democrat in the US political configuration. I have always worried about the bottom 30%. If this is true, it's a serious downside. But I don't believe it is true. But this is something which a lot of people fear, and that's the biggest challenge to globalization today in the rich countries.